Welcome, dear students. Hope you are all doing good. Today, we are going to learn about hypothalamic hypophyseal portal system. The main objectives of today's lecture are to understand the principles of endocrine communication, to discuss the difference between endocrine and nervous system, to comprehend the importance of endocrine system, to understand the concept of portal system, to study the functional anatomy of hypothalamus and pituitary gland, to unravel the hypothalamic pituitary axis function, to understand the relationship between hypothalamus and pituitary gland, that is hypophyseal portal system, to appreciate the physiological significance of hypophyseal portal system, to study about the control of secretion of hypothalamic releasing factors, and finally to see the effects of hypothalamus conditions on human body and its symptoms. So let's begin with the general principles of endocrine communication. Effective communication between different parts of the body is absolutely essential for the functioning of any multicellular organism. In vertebrates, including humans, this communication is maintained by nerve fibers and hormones. Endocrine system is thus concerned with the nature of these hormones and their hormonal communication. The endocrine system is the collection of glands that produce hormones that regulate metabolism, growth and development, tissue function, sexual function, reproduction, sleep, and mood, among other things. Hormones are specialized chemical substances that are produced by ductless internal glands or groups of secretory cells and then discharged directly into the bloodstream in response to a particular stimuli by a process of endocrine secretion. The hormones are then carried via the circulation to the other parts of the body in extreme small quantities in the dimensions of 10⁻⁷ to 10⁻⁻10 moles per liter. They exert specific regulatory effects on their selected target cells, which possess particular recognition features like hormone receptors. Some hormones, however, act more generally in the body rather than on a specific target tissue. By contrast, exocrine glands discharge their secretions via ducts to the external surface of the body, for example, milk, sweat, or into the intestinal lumen, for example, digestive enzymes. Now, before moving ahead, let's have a simple comparison between endocrine versus nervous system. As a means of communication between cells, the endocrine hormonal system may be contrasted with the nervous system. Nerve cells communicate electrically by means of precisely defined nerve fibers, releasing specific neurotransmitters onto the effector cells, for example, nerve, muscle, or gland cells. Nervous communication becomes important when a fast, rapidly modulated message is required, for example, that involves in skeletal muscle movement operating within the milliseconds, whereas hormonal communication would seem better suited for providing a more slowly developing response from several seconds to several days with longer term regulation action. There are also occasions where the two systems can be seen to interact, that is, nervous system may influence the endocrine secretion and vice versa. Now, let us briefly talk about the endocrine system. In multicellular organisms, there is a need for the cells to communicate with one another in order to coordinate their growth and metabolism. Cells communicate through their own language of chemical signals. Different compounds such as hormones and neurotransmitters act like words and phrases telling a cell about the environment around it or communicating messages. The major centers in the body for the coordination of the two systems of control are the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. Coordination is also the ability to make all parts of your body work together. The hypothalamus plays a dominant role in connecting information from other regions of the brain. It is located at the base of the brain near the pituitary gland. While it's very small, the hypothalamus plays a crucial role in many important functions, including releasing hormone and regulating body temperature. The blood vessels passing through it, the hypothalamus blood vessels, is a system of blood vessels in the microcirculation at the base of the brain, connecting the hypothalamus with the anterior pituitary. Its main function is to quickly transport and exchange hormones between the hypothalamus nucleus and the anterior pituitary gland. This information passes to the pituitary gland that, after processing by its secretions, directly or indirectly regulate the activity of other endocrine glands. The endocrine glands are ductless glands of the endocrine system that secrete their products, hormones, directly into the blood. The major glands of the endocrine system include the pineal gland, pituitary gland, pancreas, ovaries, testes, thyroid gland, parathyroid gland, hypothalamus, and adrenal glands. The secretions of the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary plays a major role in the control of hormone release. The secretory activity of most endocrine target organs is controlled by the anterior pituitary, which is in turn under the influence of hypothalamic releasing factors released by hypothalamic nerve fibers into the pituitary blood supply. The hypothalamus is a small central region of the human brain formed by the nervous fibers with various functions. The hypothalamus is considered to be a link structure between the nervous and the endocrine system. Its main function is to maintain the homeostasis of the body. Now that you have got an idea of endocrine system, let's talk about its blood supply via portal system. A portal system is one which connects two organs, neither of which is a heart. It is the system of blood vessels consisting of the portal vein with its branches. Portal system can also be defined as any system of blood vessels which has a capillary network at each end. Anterior pituitary is connected to the hypothalamus by blood vessels which form a portal system. It has one capillary bed in the hypothalamus and second in the anterior lobe of pituitary gland. Capillaries are microscopic blood vessels, and a network of capillaries is known as a capillary bed. The fluid that leaks out of the capillaries is known as interstitial fluid. It's this leaked interstitial fluid that immerses your body cells in the nutrients. Neurosecretory cells release two groups of chemical substances known as releasing factors and inhibitory factors from its nerve terminals into the blood capillaries at the hypothalamus end of the portal system. Neurosecretory cells are a type of nerve cells whose function is to translate neural signals into chemical stimuli. Neurosecretory cells are identified by characteristic electron-dense secretory cytoplasmic granules that contain serotonin, calcitonin, bombacin, encephalin, etc. These pass to the pituitary end where they cause the release of 6 hormones known as tropic hormones. Tropic hormone is a hormone that has a growth effect on the tissue it is stimulating. The term tropic means pertaining to food or nourishment, here used to mean growth. Smaller quantities of hormones are needed since there is less dilution of the hormone in selective delivery systems compared to the hormones that reach their target via the peripheral circulation. Now, before we venture into the main terrain of our topic, let's have a look on the functional anatomy of hypothalamus and pituitary gland. The hypothalamus is a region of the brain that contains an immense number of bodily functions. It is located in the middle of the base of the brain and encapsulates the ventral portion of the third ventricle. The pituitary gland, also known as hypophysis, is a roundish organ that lies immediately beneath the hypothalamus, resting in a depression of the base of the skull. In adult human or sheep, the pituitary is roughly the size and shape of a bean and its anatomical relationship with hypothalamus is unique. Careful examination of the pituitary gland reveals that it is composed of two distinctive parts. The anterior pituitary, or the adenohypophysis, is a classical gland composed predominantly of the cells that secrete protein hormones. The posterior pituitary, or neurohypophysis, is not a separate organ but an extension of hypothalamus. It is composed largely of axons of hypothalamic neurons which extend downward as a large bundle behind the anterior pituitary. It also forms the so-called pituitary stalk, which appears to suspend the anterior gland from the hypothalamus. The anterior and posterior pituitary has separate embryological origins. In many mammals, there is also an intermediate lobe, pars intermedia, between the anterior and the posterior pituitary. A key to understanding the endocrine relationship between the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary is to appreciate the vascular connections between these two organs. The secretion of hormones from the anterior pituitary is under strict control of the hypothalamic hormones. These hypothalamic hormones reach the anterior pituitary through the following route. A branch of hypophyseal artery ramifies into the capillaries bed in the lower hypothalamus, and hypothalamic hormones destined for the anterior pituitary are secreted into the capillary blood. Blood from these capillaries drain into hypothalamus hypophyseal portal veins. These veins branch again into another series of capillaries within the anterior pituitary. Capillaries within the anterior pituitary, which carry hormones secreted by the gland, join into veins that drain into the systemic venous blood. Those veins also collect capillary blood from the posterior pituitary gland. This pattern of vascular connection is thus of physiological significance. The utility of this unconventional vascular system is that minute quantities of hypothalamic hormones are carried in a concentrated form directly to their target cells in the anterior pituitary and are not diluted out in the systemic circulation. By now, as you may be curious to look deeper into the topic, let me now talk about the hypothalamic pituitary axis function. Two endocrine organs that cooperate to control the endocrine system of the body constitute the hypothalamic pituitary axis. In fact, the hypothalamus controls the pituitary gland or hypophysis, which in turn, by releasing different kinds of hormones, influences the majority of the endocrine glands in the body, such as thyroid, adrenal, gonads, as well as regulates growth, milk production, water balance. In addition to the control of the pituitary functions, the hypothalamus also has a number of connections with the limbic lobe as well as the areas of the motor system. Three lobes compose the pituitary gland: the anterior, the intermediate, and the posterior. The thyroid stimulating hormone TSH, adrenocorticotropic hormone ACTH, follicle stimulating hormone FSH, luteinizing hormone LH, prolactin PRL, and growth hormone GH are produced by the anterior lobe. The posterior pituitary instead releases vasopressin and oxytocin, both produced by the paraventricular and supraoptic hypothalamic nuclei. The main function of ADH is to regulate the water and homeostasis, while oxytocin is secreted in response to stimulation of uterus during the labor and nipples from the infant. ADH is also released at the median eminence level, from which it reaches the anterior pituitary, where it stimulates ACTH cells together with corticotropic releasing hormone to produce ACTH. For its role in stimulating ACTH release, ADH seems to be a good marker of depression. The pars intermedia is located between the anterior and posterior lobes of pituitary and produce the melanocyte stimulating hormone in the human fetal life. However, in adulthood, it is usually very small or absent. The median eminence, a crucial area of the axis located on the infundibulum, represents a connection between the hypothalamus and the hypophysis and includes the internal and external zone. The internal zone is composed by the axons of the hypothalamic neurohypophyseal system containing ADH and oxytocin. The external zone instead contains numerous axons of the hypothalamic tuberoinfundibular system that releases various neurofactors. The neurofactors are secreted through the portal blood and reach the anterior pituitary, where they excite or reduce the hormone secretions. Many axon terminals, however, contain other substances that act as modulatory factors on other axon terminals rather than secrete into the portal plexus. For instance, axon terminals containing dopamine, noradrenaline, and adrenaline modulate secretion of growth hormone through GHRH. Now, pay attention as we are going to venture deep into the core of the topic, and that is hypothalamic hypophyseal portal system. The anterior lobe is linked to the brainstem. The brainstem is the distal part of the brain that is made up of midbrain, ponus, and medulla. Each of the three components has its own unique structure and function. Together, they help to regulate breathing, heart rate, blood pressure, and several other important functions. The anterior lobe is linked to the brainstem by the hypothalamic hypophyseal portal system. This system collects blood from capillaries originating in the hypothalamus and through a plexus of veins surrounding the pituitary stalk, directs the blood into the anterior pituitary gland. This allows the neurohormones secreted by the neuroendocrine cells of the hypothalamus to be transported directly. The superior hypophyseal artery is an artery supplying the pituitary gland, and the median eminence. It is a branch of the internal carotid artery that delivers blood to an intricate network of capillaries, the primary plexus. In the median eminence of the hypothalamus, capillaries of the primary plexus converge to form a long hypophyseal portal vessels, which course down the infundibular stalk to deliver their blood to capillary sinusoids, interspersed among the secretory cells of the anterior lobe. The inferior hypophyseal arteries supply a similar capillary plexus in the lower portion of the infundibular stem. These capillaries drain into short portal vessels which supply second sinusoidal capillary network within the anterior lobe. Nearly all the blood that reaches the anterior lobe is carried in a long, short portal vessels. The anterior lobe receives only a small portion of its blood supply directly from the paired trabecular arteries, which branch to superior hypophyseal arteries. In contrast, the circulation in the posterior pituitary is unremarkable. It is supplied with blood by the inferior hypophyseal arteries. Venous blood drains from both the lobes through a number of short veins into the nearby cavernous sinuses. The portal arrangement of blood flow is important because blood that supplies the secretory cells of the anterior lobe first drains the hypothalamus. Portal blood can thus pick up chemical signals released by the neurons of the central nervous system and deliver them to the secretory cells of the anterior pituitary. As might be anticipated, because of hypophyseal portal blood flow represents only a tiny fraction of the cardiac output, only a minute amounts of neural secretions are needed to achieve biologically active concentrations in the pituitary sinusoidal blood. When delivered in this way, this arrangement also provides a measure of specificity to hypothalamic secretion, as pituitary cells are the only ones exposed to the concentration that are high enough to be physiologically active. Before I wind up this lecture, let me have your attention a few more minutes about the physiological significance of hypophyseal portal system. The main function is to quickly transport and exchange hormones between the hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary gland. The hypothalamus is involved in coordinating the physiological responses of different organs that together maintain homeostasis. It does this by integrating signals from the environment, from other brain regions, and from visceral efferents, and then stimulating appropriate neuroendocrine responses. In doing so, the hypothalamus influences many aspects of daily functions, including food intake, energy expenditure, body weight, fluid intake, balance, blood pressure, thirst, body temperature, and sleep cycle. Most of these hypothalamic responses are mediated through hypothalamic control of pituitary function. This control is achieved by two mechanisms. One, release of hypothalamic neuropeptides synthesized in the hypothalamic neurons and transported through the hypophyseal tract to the posterior lobe, and neuroendocrine control of the anterior pituitary through the release of peptides that mediate anterior pituitary hormone release. Now, patiently bear with me as we are now looking into the control of secretion of hypothalamic releasing factors. Control of secretion of releasing factors, pituitary hormones, and peripheral endocrine hormones is tightly interrelated in a set of feedback loops. The ultra-short feedback loop is mediated by the hypothalamic releasing factors limiting their own release by a type of autocrine effect on targets in the hypothalamus. Inhibition of releasing factors, secretion by pituitary hormones comprises short loop feedback. Finally, the peripheral hormone inhibition of pituitary secretion comprises the direct long loop feedback, and inhibition of hypothalamic secretion of the releasing factors comprises the indirect long loop feedback. Secretion of the posterior pituitary hormone is directly from the magnocellular neurons of the paraventricular and supraoptic nuclei into the circulation. These neurons project axon into the posterior pituitary via the hypothalamo-neurohypophyseal tract and terminate on a capillary bed of the inferior hypophyseal artery. Before I wind up this lecture, let's talk about hypothalamus conditions. Damage to the hypothalamus may impact any of these hormones and related endocrine systems. Many of these hypothalamic hormones act on the pituitary gland. The hypothalamic disease therefore affects the functioning of the pituitary gland and the target organs controlled by the pituitary, including the adrenal glands, ovaries and testes, and the thyroid gland. Hypothalamic disease is a disorder presenting primarily in the hypothalamus, which may be caused by damage resulting from malnutrition, eating disorders, genetic disorders, radiation, surgery, head trauma, lesion, tumor, or other physical injury to the hypothalamus. When the hypothalamus doesn't work properly, it is called hypothalamic dysfunction. Several things can cause hypothalamic dysfunction, including head injuries, certain genetic disorders such as growth hormone deficiency, birth defects involving the brain, or hypothalamus tumors in or around the hypothalamus, eating disorders, autoimmune conditions, and surgery involving the brain. Numerous dysfunctions manifest as a result of hypothalamic disease. Damage to the hypothalamus may cause disruptions in body temperature regulation, growth, weight, sodium and water balance, milk production, emotions, and sleep cycle. Now, hypopituitarism. The hypothalamus and pituitary gland are tightly integrated. Damage to the hypothalamus will impact the responsiveness and normal functioning of the pituitary. Hypothalamic disease may cause insufficient or inhibited signaling to the pituitary, leading to the deficiencies of one or more following hormones: thyroid stimulating hormone, adrenocorticotropic hormone, beta endorphin, luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, and melanocyte stimulating hormones. Treatment of hypopituitarism involves hormone replacement therapy. Neurological diabetes insipidus may occur due to low levels of ADH production from the hypothalamus. Insufficient levels of ADH result in increased thirst and urine output, and prolonged excessive urine excretion increases the risk of dehydration. If the hypothalamus doesn't produce and release enough vasopressin, the kidney can remove too much water. This causes increased urination and thirst. Unlike people with diabetes mellitus, People with diabetes insipidus have stable blood sugar levels. Now, tertiary hypothyroidism. The thyroid gland is an auxiliary organ to the hypothalamus pituitary system. Thyrotropin releasing hormone produced by the hypothalamus signals to the pituitary to release thyroid stimulating hormone TSH, which then stimulates the thyroid to secrete T4 and T3 thyroid hormones. Secondary hypothyroidism occurs when TSH secretion from the pituitary is impaired, whereas the tertiary hypothyroidism is the deficiency or inhibition of TRH. Prader-Willi syndrome. This is a rare inherited disorder. It causes the hypothalamus not to register when someone is full after eating. People with Prader-Willi syndrome have a constant urge to eating, increase their risk of obesity. Thyroid hormones are responsible for metabolic activity, and insufficient production of thyroid hormones may result in suppressed metabolic activity and weight gain. Hypothalamic disease may therefore have implications for obesity in many ways. Developmental disorders. Growth hormone releasing hormone GHRH is another releasing factor secreted by the hypothalamus. GHRH stimulates the pituitary gland to secrete growth hormone, which has various effects on body growth and sexual development. Insufficient growth hormone production may cause poor somatic growth, gonadotropin deficiency, failure to initiate or complete puberty, and is often associated with rapid weight gain, low T4, and low levels of sex hormones. Now, non-24-hour sleep-wake syndrome. Non-24-hour sleep-wake syndrome is a condition in which one's sleep-wake cycle is longer or rarely shorter than the standard 24 hours. It is thought to be involved in an abnormal functioning of the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the hypothalamus. Coming to the autoimmunity. Autoantibodies APAs against gonadotropin cells mainly result in hypogonadism. APAs to growth hormone cells have been associated with growth hormone deficiency, while those against the adrenocorticotropic cells have distinguished central Cushing's disease. APAs to vasopressin cells are at higher risk of developing diabetes insipidus. APAs have been also found in patients affected by idiopathic hypopituitarism, but are also present in different kinds of patients without abnormalities of the hypothalamic pituitary axis. Now, talking about the symptoms of hypothalamic condition. Hypothalamic conditions can cause a range of symptoms that depends on the part of the hypothalamus and the type of hormones involved. Some symptoms that could signal a hypothalamus problem includes unusually high or low blood pressure, body temperature fluctuations, unexplained weight loss or gain, changes in appetite, insomnia, infertility, short stature, delayed onset of puberty, dehydration, and frequent urination. While some hypothalamic conditions are unavoidable, there are a few things we can do to keep our hypothalamus healthy. Eating a balanced diet is important for every body part. It's especially crucial when it comes to the hypothalamus. A recent study in mice found that eating a high-fat diet led to inflammation of the hypothalamus. Another study in mice found that a high-sugar diet also caused inflammation of the hypothalamus. Getting enough sleep is vital for the health of hypothalamus. A 2014 study found that sleep deprivation was associated with hypothalamic dysfunctions in rats. In addition, researchers involved in the study suggested that sleep deprivation may increase someone's risk of neurological diseases. Regular exercise boosts our overall health. However, if we are having trouble with the diet part, exercise is particularly important. A 2012 study involving mice found that even a mild amount of regular exercise reduced hypothalamic inflammation. Additional symptoms include a slower metabolism and decreased muscle movement. Now finally, let us sum up the concept in 2 sentences. Hypothalamic neurons secrete releasing hormones that are transported by small hypophyseal portal blood vessels in the median eminence and pituitary stalk to affect target cells of the anterior pituitary. These respond by releasing tropic hormones that enter into the pituitary venous blood supply and are carried to target cells via the general circulation. Dear students, this is all about today's lecture. Hope you have understood well. Thank you and goodbye.